Welcome to Digication Scholars Conversations. I'm your host, Kelly Driscoll. In this episode, you'll hear part 2 of my conversation with Gillian Hannum from Manhattanville College. More links and information about today's conversation can be found on Digication's Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Full episodes of Digication Scholars Conversations can be found on YouTube or your favorite podcast app.
You are about to hear part 2 of our conversation with Gillian Hannum from Manhattanville College. Please be sure to listen to our previous episode to hear part 1 of this conversation.
I know when I was teaching, I was often rather stunned with how my students hadn't really seen some of what they were doing in courses as valuable until they were taking the time to see how they kind of connected together and different ways that they were kind of serving what they plan to do in the future. So it's fantastic to hear that those kinds of things are happening at Manhattanville. And I was curious, do you recall some of the specific prompts that you have used with students that you felt really seemed to help them make those deep connections that you were speaking of? And working with schools, we're always hearing from them, we've tried to just say, what are you learning and what do you want to do differently? And we're not getting to the heart of it. So often we hear, what really are the right questions to ask?
Well, I mean, in my experience, what I found is the ones that, connect them to where they want to go in life. So I think, one of the ones that in some ways proves to be challenging to the students because they haven't necessarily thought about it, but which they find really rewarding once they do, is asking them, you know, where in your life up to this point have you had to use ethical reasoning and ethical decision making? And if you were going to tell somebody about that, how would you do that? And one of the things that students say after taking these classes is that they feel really well prepared for interviews because the kinds of things that we ask them to write about are, the very kinds of issues that come up in job interviews. And in fact, I always start the class on the first day. I use one of those little, you know, job interview survey things that you find online and take them through some questions and have them respond. And they see that really employers want specific answers to things. So, where specifically? What can you point to? And then they start thinking and they realize, there was that time when they were an RA and they had to write somebody up. Or, there was that time when, they were put in charge of something and somebody wasn't, pulling their weight. And so I think any question that makes them dig deeply and be specific about something is really the answer. And, it kind of varies based on the topic. Um, with creativity, students tend to think, oh, creativity is art. I don't do art. I'm not
Sure, sure.
creative. So, all right, you've got to dig a little deeper. How are you creative? Creativity is problem solving. Don't you solve problems? And, then they begin to go down that road. So, I guess that's the approach that I've found helpful.
Yeah, that's great. And I do think when you get into these more specific kinds of questions, that's when you are probably finding that you get more of these personal narratives connected to what they're learning through your program. So um, it's kind of bridging their life experience with their classroom
Yes,
experience at the same time.
because it's the whole
And
package, right?
it is,
That's your
yes,
education, that's your life. So,
exactly. Yeah, it's a very holistic approach.
yeah.
And
One one
go
other
ahead.
thing that we do, you were asking about audience, and one other thing that we do at the upper levels when we ask them to create a public portfolio, I pair my students with alumni who are working in a field that they're interested in working with, and I have them do an informational interview with that alum to just sort of learn, what they do, what their path was, what was valuable from their Manhattanville education to help them get where they are. And then I ask them at the end of the semester to share a link to their final course portfolio with that alum and get some feedback from them about, whether they feel that, this is a good presentation for somebody who would want to work in that field. So, that's yet another audience. And then we also have been sharing them, particularly since the pandemic. We used to have an in person showcase at the end of each semester. And, people would come to a room and we'd have the students set up at terminals and they'd show their portfolios and people would walk around. And that was always a nice event. But we couldn't do that last spring or fall, probably not this semester. So we created an online showcase. I made a gigantic Digication ePortfolio with tabs for the different classes and then linked up the individual portfolios to those. And we sent it out to the whole community. And because those were all public portfolios, the students could forward them to their family, friends, and relatives. And, in some ways, I think we got, even much wider exposure doing that. So,
Yeah, well, I'm so glad that you shared that because I have found that although these have been incredibly challenging times, um, that many institutions and faculty members and students have just really touched on this point about creativity that you were speaking about earlier and have delved into new ways that they can continue to have connections and community, even though we're apart. And, just making use of all of the tools that they have available to shine light on the work and experience that's still happening despite all of the challenges.
yeah, we used
So,
ePortfolio for Earth Week. We did a virtual Earth Week all on Digication last
oh,
April.
that's
And we're going to
fantastic.
do it again this year. So,
And we'll be sure to share links to those other ePortfolios too, and highlight some of the students that you spoke about as well, so folks have the chance to kind of navigate through those and learn more about how they might implement something like that on their campus too. Um, I did want to hear a little bit if you've heard from some students. You mentioned that there's some connections that you make with current students with alumni to get feedback on their e-portfolios and their kind of readiness to prepare to show themselves to potential employers in those fields. Are some of these alumni, did they go through the Atlas program and create portfolios themselves too? I'm just kind of interested if they've
yes, sometimes,
had that kind of
sometimes it's a
interaction.
mixture. It's sometimes it's a student who's been out for 8 or 10 years. Sometimes it's a student who's just been out for a couple of years. It's a small liberal arts college. We get to know the students pretty well. So, it's probably like the old time matchmakers thinking about, who would be a good pair. But,
Right, right.
for sure, sometimes as early as the next year, sometimes I'll hit up a student who, did Compass last year. And this year I'll say, would you be willing to? And they're thrilled to do that. They get
Oh, that's
excited when they see that they've moved on into that position. And particularly for students interested in particular graduate programs, somebody who's in that program at the moment is really a great connection to have. And many of the students continue to use their portfolios after they graduate as well. One of the ones that I shared for today, Taylor Sinclair, I just happened to pull up her portfolio when I was looking through last year's bunch and saw that she has been updating it even though she graduated last May, and she's now positioned herself as a professional rather than a college student. And
right.
there are others that are doing that as well. So,
That's fabulous. Yeah, we really want alumni to continue to have connections to the institution and be able to make use of all of the time and effort that they put into their ePortfolios after graduation. And we do find that some students will continue to update the portfolios that they developed while they were students, and others start to create new ePortfolios around specific kinds of jobs that they've had or career aspirations that they have. And I love that you've been able to get alumni involved with the students to give them that feedback to help them get ready for those next steps. Um, on your website, I saw that you've collected some really nice testimonials from students about the Atlas program. And I was curious if there were any kinds of testimonials or feedback that surprised you that you hadn't planned for, or things that you saw students doing that maybe made you expand some of your thinking about how the program works.
Well, I think we've certainly seen over time, through what students have done in the original classes, possibilities for expanding in other areas. Certainly, the standalone intercultural awareness class sort of grew out of the little taste of intercultural awareness that they got in the passport class, and we saw that students were interested in that, and that there was, a need to develop that. And so, that kind of developed on its own. Similarly, I think in many ways, the student leadership class, which was developed in conjunction with our Center for Student Involvement and Leadership on campus, um, grew in part out of having students in the other Atlas classes needing to think about, what kind of leader they are. If they had to describe their leadership style, what would it be? Can they give an example of when they feel that they've been an effective leader? And so I think that laid the groundwork for then, again, a standalone class. And we just offered it for the first time this semester. We put two sections up. They both filled early with a waiting list. So it's an area where there's a lot of interest. And again, there really wasn't a niche in our academic curriculum that lent itself particularly to that. So a lot of these interdisciplinary things have been a good fit for us. Um, we also collaborate with the first year program. In fact, the whole first year program, the freshman seminar, is now all using Digication, um, because of the ability to assess the first year program. After some years of doing different things, we've moved back to a common theme first year seminar, and it's based on the history and mission of the college. And all of the students in that and all of the faculty are using ePortfolio at least to some extent. Not quite at the level that we do in the Atlas classes, but it's familiarizing many more students with ePortfolio pedagogy. So, yeah.
Right, right. Fabulous. And I know I think I saw at some point that the advising intersects with the kind of pathways that the students are on. Do the portfolios play a role in that as well?
Um, yes and no. I mean, we've tried different things at different times, and it kind of changes when the registration uh,
Hmm.
backdoor stuff changes. So
Sure, sure.
for a while, we were using a tool specifically in Digication with all the advisors, but then we got kind of a new package software that meshed with our registration system. So at the moment, we're not doing exactly that, but we do have several people from the advising staff who teach in the Atlas program. So we also have advising staff come into the Atlas classes and engage in discussion about forward planning. So even though they're now doing that actual planning in the student planning tool rather than on a separate ePortfolio, it's building again on that reflective practice. And one other thing we found is that colleges, liberal arts colleges in particular, have general education requirements, and the students have got to take, humanities and social science and math and
Right,
science. And,
right,
and often the students are thinking, why do I have to take that? I'm not ever going to do anything with that. Well, one of the interesting things that we found, particularly at the junior and senior level, is as they're thinking about these skills that employers are looking for, sometimes they're finding that they develop those in a required course that
right.
they
Yeah,
might not have otherwise taken. And
yeah,
so it's been a really good advertising, if you will, for general education and the gen ed program. Yeah, so that fits in very well with advising. And
yeah,
we
absolutely.
have both the advising staff and the student mentors come and speak, especially at the first 2 years, to the students in the Atlas classes.
That's great. And I had a question about your classes as they're kind of exploring these different occupations and learning about some of the skills that the employers are looking for. And do you find that some students, as they're going through this process, kind of shift where they may have initially been thinking as they start to learn more about themselves through this process?
I think they certainly broaden. Um, And sometimes they shift. I mean, usually by the time they're juniors, there's some level of certainty. Or more often they have an idea of the general direction they want to go, but
Mm,
maybe not the specifics. So they might know that they want to go into, some kind of humanitarian service work or, something along those lines, but they're not sure exactly what. And so having the opportunity to dig a little deeper, to talk to somebody who's working in that field can help them, I think, to narrow that focus and get a clearer idea of where they might fit in.
great. And I know you mentioned that with the Atlas program, it's always something that's kind of growing and developing over time as you use it. Can you speak to any of the kind of things that you might be planning next?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things we want to do is just, continue to grow the program. Um, we've, I think, done quite well since 2016 in terms of both the number of students that we've touched. We tend to have maybe about 10, 11, 12 sections of Atlas
Mhm.
classes running each semester. Um, I think there are possibilities to merge it perhaps more fully with things like our internship program. We do have an Atlas fourth credit option that allows students to earn an additional 1 credit by doing service learning in conjunction with another class that they're taking. And we have a couple of students every semester who opt for that. And so that, again, uses the ePortfolio platform to keep the community service director who oversees the placement, the course instructor, and the Atlas instructor and the student all seeing what's going on from week to week. They keep a journal, they do reflection papers, they meet periodically with the course instructor and document that. And we've talked off and on about, perhaps also moving in that direction with internships as well. In my department in art history, we do the internship on an e-portfolio. We actually have all of our students create a portfolio that we use within our department to see if we're meeting the learning objectives that we claim that we're asking students to learn. So in the junior and senior year we set them up with a portfolio to assess that, and we ask them to look at the various areas for learning objectives and to put some pieces of work up that they feel demonstrates that and to say why. And then we also include their record of their internship there. And again, they have it all in one place if they're going to go and apply to graduate school, which a number of them do. They've got, samples of their best papers. They've got, their internship record, all of it right in one place at their fingertips. So, it's been effective in that as well.
Yeah. Well, Jillian, it's been so wonderful to talk to you today. One of my last questions for you was really about this extraordinary experience and history that you have at the college. And if there's some things that you might share about where you would like to go next, and maybe highlight what you feel most proud of during your time at Manhattanville.
So Kelly knows I'm retiring at the end of this semester after 34 years, I guess. And it's a little bittersweet. It's been perfect for me. I couldn't have wound up in a better place. The things that I think have been most meaningful to me, because it's a small personal college, I've made lifelong friendships with students. There's I have a friend that, she was in the very first class. She was a senior the year that I was hired. She's one of my best friends now. And
Oh,
there are many, many examples of that over the years. So I think, those connections, I think feeling like you've made a difference. You know, Teaching is really something that's a calling. There are other things you can do where maybe make more money or it'd be a little bit more glamorous. But, I think there's not a day when you're a teacher when you don't make a difference for somebody. And I think that's just incredibly rewarding. And, for me, Manhattanville has been terrific because it's allowed me to do a lot of different things. I've had opportunities to take students on study tours to Europe. I've been to Venice more times than I can count with groups of students, and just being able to have students who maybe have never been out of the country before experience, another place, another culture, see, the art in situ is just wonderful. So those are all incredibly, meaningful things. And what am I going to do next? Well, I'm probably going to start to learn again. I think I have a couple of things I'm working on. I'm working on a book project with another art historian about the political engagement of women artists from the 1970s to the present. So that's an ongoing project that we're supposed to wrap up the text by the end of the calendar year. Um, I'm involved with a couple of arts organizations in New York City. I'm on the board of the Print Club of New York, so I will have more time to go to galleries and exhibitions and
yeah.
things like that. Um, Attend lectures, travel, read that pile of books that I haven't had time to get to yet. So all of those things. So
Oh. Well, that sounds fabulous, and you have definitely made a difference, and I can speak to that personally. Also, knowing you and your work with ePortfolios and your just amazing commitment to your students and the institution has been very inspiring. And the way that you have been utilizing Digication has also helped us really learn about different ways that we can continue to kind of push and grow our technology to suit fascinating educators like yourself. So you have made such a difference for me personally, but the company and the technology too. So I
Well,
wanted
thanks,
to
and
thank
and
you for
and
that
thanks
also.
to Digication for, you guys have been terrific when we've had an idea or wanted to do something or, wanted to do something a little differently. You've just been great working with us to make that happen, and we really appreciate it. And again, I'm happy, to have you share my email if people have questions or would like more information about something. I'm,
Thank
very
you.
happy to do that. And you know, again, it's for me, it's kept things interesting and creative. I I use it in my art history classes. I have the students create virtual exhibitions, using the gallery function and so forth in Digication, to learn about, thinking through how you exhibit art. So it's a very versatile tool.
We try, yeah. But we always, and during this last year, even, we've seen new ways that people are putting it to work. So it always keeps us thinking about other things that we might be able to build or refine, and so it's exciting. So thank you again so much for joining us today. It was wonderful to see you and to learn more about you and the Atlas program and some of the history with portfolios at the institution.
Great. Well,
So
thank you,
thank you.
Kelly. I enjoyed it.
See you.
Digication Scholars Conversations is brought to you by Digication, a technology platform powering the most innovative ePortfolio programs in K through 12 and higher education. Our website can be found at digication.com. This episode was produced by Drew Albanesius and Amanda Driscoll. Thanks for watching.